Welcome back to the Avion 20th Anniversary Podcast. Today we welcome Ashley Stewart, my partner and a wealth manager who's spent the last 15 years guiding clients through life's pivotal transition, of which 13 were here at Avion. Ashley brings us a unique blend of steady insight and heartfelt care, which has become a hallmark of the Avion experience. In this episode, Ashley's going to share some lessons learned, memorable moments, and what stewardship means in the next chapter of Avion's story. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me today.
So, we started out talking about pivotal transitions, life transitions, lessons learned. What I'd like to do is, when you meet a client facing one of these big life transitions, what do you ask first?
I typically, want to find out what's most important to them. What are their life priorities and who's most important to them to really get a full understanding of the entire situation.
Do you have any interesting transition stories with any of your clients?
Oh, sure. There's many. Working in this industry for so many years, we've got lots of wonderful stories that have, taught us along the way too of how to react and how to be there for our clients and how to continue to be better going forward as well. But I can certainly think of a couple, one that they had a business that, was primarily most of their cash flow and they were getting ready to retire and transition that and weren't sure what the future was going to hold, weren't sure, what that transition looks like after selling the business that they spent so much of their, life building. And it was a wonderful experience to be able to show them, we can continue to have an income stream, but you don't have to be tied to this business and their responsibilities, and you can focus on other things that are important to you and focus on your kids and your grandkids and traveling and doing all the other things that you enjoy doing. And so building that and creating that picture for them has been a great experience so far, and I think was really eye-opening to them to be able to see that they could anchor somewhere and help build them a plan to where they could see what life looks like after the business sale.
I had an interesting phone call with an M&A attorney here in Houston, and we were talking about transitions. We're talking about a client who's prepping a business for sale, and he made a very interesting comment. Actually, he said, people who run a business, own a business, or in other areas of life, they're very good at what they do. But when you make these transitions, be it selling a business or some other transition, it's often the first time it's ever happened to them. And now we've got someone who's very good at what they do, doing something that really they have next to no knowledge or experience with. What would you add to that statement or any experiences with regard to that?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things to always, ask them is after they sell the business, how do they want to spend their time? How do they envision that, next stage, that next phase of life? I think it's important for them to have an idea of how they want to spend their time because it is a very big life transition.
So, what makes a transition a defining point? What are some of the emotional, financial pitfalls that come with a transition such as this? And how do families keep their relationships intact during these periods?
Well, I think we've seen with a lot of business owners, that's a big part of their identity. And so I think emotionally, it's a big transition stepping out of that. And then financially, that liquidity event can, be a much bigger number than they've seen in their bank account before. And something that we have done a lot of, coaching around is something that's called the wealth effect and helping them understand that needs to last for hopefully several generations. And sometimes, that big number is kind of the opposite of sticker shock. You have to be very careful to not get too wrapped up in that initial transaction number.
Yeah, I think I've seen it too. The wealth effect's an interesting thing. People get this check, maybe it's $10 million, and they feel like they can go out and buy a $2 million boat and a bigger house and big this and big that. And then the remaining balance isn't enough to generate the income they need for this new lifestyle they've just created for themselves. Also, do you find that there are misunderstandings with regard to maybe the tax impact of this windfall going forward?
Yeah, sure. There's lots of different ways in the business transaction. There's different pieces that are taxed in different ways. And so it's really important to have a team up front planning and collaborating to make sure that at the end of the day, you get the least amount of tax impact and the most to be able to carry forward for yourself and your family. But it usually is, a big piece of that initial, check from the transaction.
Yeah, and of course, I wrote the book, Tips and Traps, Maximizing Your Wealth While Selling Your Business. And we talk about how having great advice can help you determine the best way to sell the business such that you can minimize the tax impact. You also I think you say when you get into transitions, two other major transitions. One is inheritance or generational transfer, and the other is retirement after a long career. Can you talk about either of those?
Yeah, absolutely. We've certainly, had experience with families that wealth transition was faster than they planned, sometimes and sometimes unexpected. And the biggest piece that I feel like has been the most impactful and rewarding for us to be a part of is the fact that there was a plan. And even though, the plan changed and there's unexpected things, having a plan to start is way better than no plan at all. And especially when it comes to estate planning, we've set on the side of being those estate plans from the get go of when they were designed to following through and seeing that completely implemented to the next generation. And it's nice to see that, there are ways to avoid probate and there are ways to transition things to your adult children in a way that leaves them hopefully more protected to be able to make, responsible decisions going forward. But without a plan, it would have been devastating for some of those.
Yeah, so one of our tagline is attention to every last detail. And one thing I think people don't realize is it's one thing to have an estate plan. It's another thing to execute on it and to be there to make sure the attorneys stay on track, make sure that there's some kind of communication to help optimize the choices that inherently exist in a probate slash trust transition. What about retiring after a long career? How would you discuss or caution clients with regards to that?
That's also a really big identity and life transition as well. I've worked with a couple of executives that worked for big companies for, decades and transitioning to retirement. A lot of it was, okay, we've got plenty of assets accumulated. You've got a very strong plan. Now it's time to, put yourself first and figure out how do you want to spend the next phase of life and getting them used to an income stream that's now coming from their portfolio as opposed to the company they were working for. And then there's a big tax strategy that goes with that. Typically, if you've been an executive for a large company for a long time, you have a lot of concentrated stock with that company. And we like to develop strategies around tax and, of course, the portfolio and over concentration to be able to unwind that over time, depending on, again, the client's needs and wants. But that's a big piece of it. And also, too, just making sure that emotionally, they're prepared and they have a plan for how they want to spend their time.
So, overconcentration of stock is actually something that I know we both run into with clients. I mean, we can pick your company, but people believe in their employer. They love their employer, and they tend to forget that the market doesn't care. And, we've had clients who, until very recently, took a very bad beating with certain companies like Boeing and some others. And I picked that one because that finally it's recovered. But there's the overconcentration of risk is something that's not well perceived by people with large positions in an individual stock. And there are all sorts of ways to diversify that risk. Some involve selling the stock, others don't. What have been your lessons that you've learned with regards to this issue?
I would say I think some of my biggest lessons is having a plan and sticking to it as opposed to just wait and see. Because if you wait and see with no plan with certain parameters around it, like you said, there can be windfalls, but there can be really unexpected quick losses at the same time.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's important to the client is an ongoing trusted relationship. If someone comes to us 3 months before the sale of a business or retirement, we're trying to scramble someone. Talk me through that. Talk me through why waiting to the last minute just makes things more difficult both for you and for the client.
Oh, absolutely. The earlier you can put a plan together and have a team in place, the better off you will be. When we don't have a lot of time to put things together, a lot of the actions that we would have taken, those options are off the table now. Everything, again, from taxes to estate planning to setting it up for the next generations, those decisions and those pieces of the plan typically need to be put in place maybe a year or so out prior to that type of business transition.
I do think a lot of potential clients think, well, you know what, a month prior to departure, I'll go visit an advisor. And he's not thinking through, well, that advisor now needs some estate planning done. Heck, just getting in with a good estate attorney could take a couple of months. And then you got to talk it through, do the paperwork, get it signed. Even 3 months isn't long enough.
And I think it's also important to not make too many major decisions in too short of time. We've certainly seen in some client situations, whether it be a business windfall or an inheritance, that sometimes too quickly they've made so many changes that when you add it all up, now they've put themselves in a situation that's a little bit more difficult, as opposed to staging it out with, again, a plan that makes sense.
Absolutely. And this really comes down to the role of a trusted partner that can be with you for an extended period of time, that knows you personally and professionally, and helps you as a client feel more anchored in your decision, and also a thought partner. Today we now have AI acting as a thought partner, and it does a great job in certain areas. But when we come down to huge life decisions, having a human professional that really has been there, done that, and seen firsthand, it's different, and it will probably always be different, thank goodness. So Avian for 20 years now has been focused on creating those long-term partnerships. And we have many, many clients who've been with us the entire time or have joined since then and are still with us today. And I love it. They're my friends, they're people we care about, and we're making a difference. The next difference is the next generation. Talk to me about the importance of our role and helping the next generation prepare to take the lead.
We've got a lot of, clients that have accumulated and built a great plan that is certainly going to outlive their lifetime. And the biggest thing is wanting to efficiently transfer that to their heirs and maybe in the next generation. One of the really neat things that I've seen being, here for several years is I love the Roth conversion strategy. I love, planning for their kids at a young age and setting aside early on and really getting the impact of that time value of money and compound growth over time. And whenever, we look forward and we're able to transition wealth to the next generation completely tax free or maybe completely in Roth IRAs, it's about what you keep. And to me, that's a huge impact as opposed to a child inheriting an IRA that they've got to withdraw over 10 years on top of their taxable income and their peak earning years. But when they're able to inherit $1 million of a Roth IRA, that's a huge difference. And then, another piece is, like I said, planning early with the kids, and whether that be in education accounts or Roth IRAs for them or custodial accounts for them. Now, when they're, adults and they're in their working years, they've got a really great nest egg that has, built up that their parents over time, that was small amounts that they didn't really notice setting aside, but now they've given their kids a great start to their wealth accumulation.
Yeah, I one of my greatest joys is I have longstanding clients now who their kids were young, not even in their teens when we met them, and now they're launched. They're launched into high-paying, satisfying, rewarding careers, and they're now becoming clients. Whenever we have a client, their kids are automatically welcome to be clients. So they may be coming in below the zone, as we'd say in the military, but we have confidence that there's more to come and that they're going to be increasingly successful. It's been a great 20 years. What do you think about the next 20 years? What's that going to look like, in your opinion?
That's a hard question to answer. We're definitely in a different place than we are now than I think any of us envisioned 10 years ago. But I think there's so much opportunity. I think AI is going to change things a lot and allow us to be more efficient with our time, be more deliberate with our client and time, and of course, like deliverables. I think there's lots of opportunity. If anything, because of the additional technological additions, I think it allows us to be more focused and do more of the brainstorming and the planning and be the person in the relationship that, again, anchors them to the big plan.
We've talked about transitions as the theme here. What do you see as the transitions of the future? What may be different looking forward than in the past?
I think, one thing that'll be different is access to information and resources. There's more of that than there, ever has been. I think that one of, our clients, especially the more wealthy ones, the limited resources is going to be time and quality time doing the things that they enjoy as opposed to their wealth or their other resources. And so I think it's going to potentially transition, the relationship of the advisor more than ever a relationship business and there to help understand the big picture as opposed to, ideas or strategies along the way. I think it's more going to be someone that's able to walk them through kind of the big picture as they are making decisions and walking through things.
How would you say Avion is preparing its next generation of advisors and its teams to meet these evolving needs?
We've invested a tremendous amount of time and resources into training for the next generation of wealth managers and relationship managers here. We're very process oriented. We want to make sure that, things don't slip through the cracks. And so we have a process for just about everything because we're all humans. But I think the biggest thing is just making sure we've got plenty of training to be able to share the knowledge and share the resources.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I would suggest that the challenge a lot of organizations are going to have in the future, there will always be a need for professionals who know how to use the tools that are available. But in this industry, like many, there is a period of grinding it out to learn the tools of the trade. And that grinding it out is going to be replaced by tech. And so, my belief strongly, and that's why we've doubled down on this, is if you can't grind it out, then you need to increase the quality and quantity of the training and learning experience that they would otherwise have got through those original apprenticeship type roles. So, actually, these are all great thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts on the topic of transitions?
I would just say the earlier the better when it comes to things like this. And again, the timing can sometimes be unexpected, but the earlier you can get with a team and get with wealth manager to build a plan for yourself and for your family, typically the better off you are.
Great. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate the last 15 years, and we appreciate your thoughts on this stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here today, Paul.
So, if you're facing or anticipating a major change in your life or family, you want to ask yourself, how confident are you in the planning behind that change? I'd invite you to visit our website to explore how Avion's long-term relationship-driven approach can guide you through the changes that matter in life. We also have some excellent 20th anniversary content on there. Some of it's quite entertaining, back to the day we literally started this business at my kitchen table. In our next episode, I'm going to be joined by my partner and wealth manager, Sarah MacGyver, and we're going to chat about how we approach caring for families across generations. Until then, we wish you the best of investment success and look forward to seeing you next time.